She walked into the Couture show and saw another woman wearing the tribute she had commissioned for her mother. Vivian Hartwell entered the private runway room in Manhattan at 6 minutes after 8, just as the lights lowered from white to silver and every phone in the front row lifted toward the same impossible sight. The room smelled of orchids, perfume, cold champagne, and rain drying from expensive coats. Editors whispered behind black programs. Donors adjusted pearls. Camera flashes cut through the dim like small bursts of lightning. Vivian stopped near the aisle, her invitation card still between her fingers, and for 1 second the entire city seemed to narrow into the woman sitting beside her husband. Celeste Monroe was in the front row, one ankle crossed with careful confidence, wearing the silver-blue couture gown Vivian had ordered 6 months earlier from Adrian Vale's atelier. The fabric moved like moonlight over water. Tiny hand-sewn crystals traced the bodice in soft arcs. The neckline curved exactly the way Vivian had approved during the second fitting, inspired by the photograph of her mother at the first Sloan Arts Gala in 1989. Even from 30 feet away, Vivian recognized the hidden pleat near the waist, the slight fall of the train, the shimmer that was not meant to shout but to remember. Celeste turned when the whispers changed direction. She saw Vivian standing in the aisle and smiled as though the room had been waiting for that moment. "Beautiful, is it not?" she said, lifting her chin toward the gown. "Some women only get to pay for elegance. Others get to wear it." A few people nearby went still, not silent, because fashion rooms rarely knew how to be silent, but still in the way people become when cruelty has been spoken softly enough to pass for taste. Nathaniel Hartwell stood behind Celeste's chair in a black tailored suit, his hand resting lightly on the back of it, polished and calm under the runway lights. He looked at Vivian only after everyone else did. That delay told her more than an apology ever could have erased. Her seating card remained on the chair beside him, ivory paper, black ink, her married name printed with perfect formality. But Celeste had taken the attention, the gown, the cameras, and the place where Nathaniel's loyalty should have been. Vivian's throat tightened. She looked at the dress again, not as a wife looking at a rival, but as a daughter watching someone borrow her grief and call it glamour. 6 months earlier, she had sat in Adrian's atelier while a seamstress pinned the hem, and Adrian described the gown as a tribute piece, a living echo of Margaret Sloane's elegance. Vivian had imagined wearing it at the scholarship announcement for young artists who could not afford their first portfolios. She had imagined standing beneath soft light, saying her mother's name without crying. Now Celeste smoothed one hand over the skirt as photographers leaned closer. Nathaniel stepped toward Vivian, lowering his voice. "Do not ruin this night. It is just a dress." Vivian looked at him then. The cameras flashed behind him. The music began to pulse through the runway room. Her eyes burned, but no tear fell. She glanced once toward the gown's inner side seam, where the atelier had sewn her full name into the authentication lining. Then she answered so softly only Nathaniel could hear. "Did you read the buyer file before you handed her my dress?" For a moment, Nathaniel looked as if he had not heard the question, but Vivian knew he had. The words buyer file had reached him beneath the music, beneath the cameras, beneath the careful mask of a man who believed social rooms could be controlled by posture alone. His hand slipped from the back of Celeste's chair. Celeste noticed, and her smile tightened before she turned back toward the photographers, as if the gown itself could protect her from ownership. Vivian did not move from the aisle. The silver-blue fabric caught the runway light with every small shift of Celeste's shoulders, and each shimmer brought Vivian back to the atelier 6 months earlier, when the dress had still been only a sketch on thick cream paper. Adrian Vale had stood beside the fitting platform in his charcoal jacket, a pencil tucked behind one ear, his expression softer than his reputation. He had not spoken loudly. Couture houses rarely did. They understood that luxury was most powerful when it whispered. He had placed the original sketch in Vivian's hands and said the neckline would echo the Sloane Gala portrait without copying it. "Your mother had restraint," he told her. "We should honor that." Vivian had looked at the drawing until the lines blurred. Margaret Sloane, her mother, had worn a pale blue gown to the first Sloan Arts Gala in 1989, back when the charity was still held in a rented museum wing and the flower arrangements had been donated by a friend. In the photograph, Margaret stood beneath a banner for young painters, smiling with the calm belief that art could save people who had never been invited into beautiful rooms. Vivian had been 9 years old then, hiding behind a column with grape juice on her sleeve, watching her mother speak to donors as though every scholarship check already belonged to some child with paint under their fingernails. That was the memory Adrian had promised to preserve. Not status, not vanity, not a front-row performance for a mistress under flashing lights. During the first fitting, the satin had been placed against Vivian's shoulder like cool water. A seamstress pinned the side while Mara Ellison, the private client director, read from the commission notes. Silver blue French satin, hand-applied crystal work, hidden authentication lining, tribute inscription. Final presentation reserved for the Hartwell Arts Foundation scholarship announcement. Vivian remembered asking that the gown not feel bridal, not feel loud, not feel like an advertisement for money. Adrian had nodded. It should feel like someone remembered where elegance came from, he said. Now, in the runway room, Celeste crossed one leg and let the train spill across the floor for the cameras. The same train Vivian had approved inch by inch. The same crystals that had taken weeks of handwork. The same hidden lining where her name was sewn not for display, but for record. Nathaniel leaned closer, his voice almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Vivian, please. This is not the place. She looked at him, then at Celeste, then at the seating card with her name waiting beside a chair no one had protected. This had become the place the moment you let her wear my mother's tribute, she said. A nearby editor stopped pretending not to listen. Celeste turned then, the gown rustling softly around her knees. Her eyes were bright, amused, and impatient. Honestly, Vivian, she said, do not turn a beautiful evening into a museum lecture. Some things are meant to be seen on the right woman. The pain moved through Vivian quietly, but it did not bend her. She looked at the gown one last time and saw not Celeste, not Nathaniel, not the front row, but her mother standing beneath museum lights with hope in her hands. Then Vivian stepped past her own seating card and chose an empty chair across the aisle, far from Nathaniel, far from the performance. She sat down in her simple black dress and pearl earrings, placed the invitation on her lap, and waited for the show to say what she would not. 3 weeks before the show, the first warning arrived in a message so polite it almost disappeared among ordinary calendar updates. Vivian was in her home office overlooking Central Park, reviewing scholarship applications for the Hartwell Arts Foundation, when Mara Ellison's name appeared on her phone. Mara rarely called without scheduling first. That was how private client directors at Couture houses protected dignity. They made urgency sound like etiquette. Vivian answered beside a stack of student portfolios, her coffee untouched, her mother's pearl earrings resting in a small velvet box on the desk. Mrs. Hartwell, Mara said carefully, I wanted to confirm whether you personally approved the final fitting redirect. Vivian looked toward the window. Rain had begun to blur the park into gray and green. What redirect? There was a small silence on the line, the kind professionals use when they are choosing truth over comfort. Mara explained that the final fitting for the silver blue tribute gown had been marked as rescheduled by family office instruction. The gown was no longer listed for Vivian's private appointment at Adrian Vale's atelier. It had been requested for delivery to Celeste Monroe's penthouse for a public appearance before the runway event. Vivian did not speak. She only reached for a pen and wrote down the words because writing them made them less able to pretend. Celeste Monroe. Public appearance. Alternate use. Then Mara forwarded the email thread. Vivian opened it on her laptop. The first message came from Nathaniel's assistant. All polished efficiency and no shame. Mr. Hartwell requests that the Sloan tribute gown be released to Ms. Monroe for styling approval. The second message was shorter. Nathaniel himself had written it from his private account. Approved. Make sure it photographs well. Vivian stared at those 5 words until the room seemed to lose sound. Not because Nathaniel had betrayed her with Celeste. That truth had already been entering her life in pieces. Late dinners, protected phone screens, society photographs where Celeste appeared too near and Vivian appeared too absent. This was colder. This was not just another woman. This was her mother's tribute being treated like wardrobe. A gown commissioned through the foundation, built from memory, paid for with purpose, redirected as if Vivian's grief had no locked door. She did not call Nathaniel. She did not call Celeste. She did not send a message written in pain that someone could later call emotional. She called Mara back and asked for the complete buyer file. Mara's voice softened. I thought you might. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, Vivian entered the side door of Adrian Vale's atelier on West 57th Street, avoiding the photographers who sometimes waited near the main entrance during show week. The atelier was quiet in the way only expensive rooms were quiet. Padded floors, pale walls, mirrored panels, cream garment bags hanging like sealed secrets. Mara met her in the archive corridor, wearing a black dress and the expression of someone who had already decided where her loyalty belonged. I am sorry, she said. Vivian shook her head once. Do not apologize for keeping records. Mara led her into a private room where the original sketch waited on the table beneath soft museum light. Beside it lay the purchase order, payment confirmation, fitting notes, authentication tag, commission agreement, and a small card printed with Vivian Hartwell's name. The silver blue gown was not there. Its absence filled the room more loudly than fabric ever could. Vivian looked at the empty dress form near the wall and imagined Celeste standing before a mirror, learning how to smile in a story she had not earned. Mara placed one document in front of her. No buyer release was signed, she said. No permission transfer exists. Vivian touched the edge of the sketch, careful not to bend it. Then Nathaniel did not give her address, she said quietly. He gave her evidence. Mara Ellison placed the buyer file under the soft archive light, and each page seemed to remove one more illusion from Nathaniel's carefully arranged lie. The purchase order carried Vivian's full name in black print. The payment record showed the Hartwell Arts Foundation account, approved by Vivian alone, not by Nathaniel, not by his office, not by anyone who could turn memory into publicity without permission. The commission agreement named the gown as the Margaret Sloane tribute piece, and beneath that line, in Adrian Vale's precise handwriting, was a note Vivian remembered from the first fitting: restraint, silver blue light, mother's neckline, no spectacle. Vivian read the words once, then again, because grief had a strange way of becoming steadier when someone else had written it down correctly. Mara opened the authentication folder next. Inside was a photograph of the inner lining before final closure, where the atelier had sewn the invisible ownership tag beneath the side seam. Vivian Hartwell. Private commission. Non-transferable presentation unless released by buyer. There were fitting notes from 6 months of appointments: shoulder adjustment, half-inch hem correction, crystal density reduced near waist, train length held at 48 inches for gala movement, not runway drama. Every detail belonged to her hand, her memory, her mother's story. Celeste had not chosen the gown. She had stepped into a record. Mara pointed to the buyer release section, where the signature line remained empty. No authorization was ever filed, she said. We received pressure through Mr. Hartwell's office, but the house never received your consent. Vivian looked up. Then why was it sent? Mara's composure wavered for the first time. The courier team received a release instruction marked urgent from his family office. It referenced the foundation event and said the gown was being styled for your household. By the time I saw the destination address, it had already left. I called you immediately after the discrepancy was confirmed. Vivian imagined the garment bag leaving the atelier, the silver blue gown sealed in tissue, traveling through Manhattan traffic to Celeste's penthouse instead of to the woman whose mother had inspired every stitch. The insult was not loud. That was why it cut so cleanly. It had been done through emails, assistants, delivery forms, polite words, and the kind of confidence powerful men used when they believed women would rather absorb humiliation than interrupt a schedule. Mara slid the original sketch closer. Adrian has seen the file, she said. He is not pleased. The door opened then, and Adrian Vale entered without the theatrical air he carried at public shows. In the archive room, he looked older, sharper, and more human. His eyes went first to Vivian, then to the empty dress form. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, I owe your mother better than this. Vivian almost lowered her eyes, but she did not. You owe the truth to the buyer, she said. Adrian nodded once. The truth is documented. The gown was commissioned by you through the foundation. It honors Margaret Sloane. There is no transfer, no loan agreement, no release. If Ms. Monroe wears it publicly, she is not wearing a gift. She is wearing a misrepresentation. Vivian let the word settle. Misrepresentation sounded cold enough to survive a room full of cameras. Adrian turned one page in the file and tapped the closing tribute schedule. The collection already includes a final acknowledgement to patrons and commission buyers. Your piece was always meant to be shown on screen tonight as part of the Foundation tribute. Original sketch. Buyer name. Inspiration note. I can remove it if you wish to avoid attention. Vivian thought of Nathaniel's message. Make sure it photographs well. She thought of Celeste smoothing the gown in front of a mirror, smiling into borrowed meaning. Then she thought of her mother beneath museum lights, raising money for children who only needed one open door. No, Vivian said quietly. Do not remove it. Adrian studied her face. Are you certain? Vivian touched the buyer card with her name on it, then withdrew her hand. I will not pull the dress back from her, she said. Let the show say who it belongs to. Adrian did not smile when Vivian answered. He only closed the buyer file with both hands, as if sealing the decision inside the room before the world could touch it. Then we keep the closing tribute, he said. Original sketch. Commission note. Buyer name. Foundation dedication. Mara looked from him to Vivian, her face composed but her eyes bright with the quiet satisfaction of a professional who had watched records become protection. The show will not accuse anyone, Adrian continued. It will simply tell the truth in the order it was always meant to be told. Vivian understood the mercy in that. No scene. No confrontation in a hallway. No photographs of her reaching for fabric that already belonged to her by record, payment, and purpose. Celeste could arrive in the gown. Nathaniel could stand beside her and believe charm had edited the file. The cameras could adore the shimmer. The editors could whisper. And then the final screen would appear, not as revenge, but as documentation under runway lights. Mara opened the production schedule and showed Vivian the closing sequence. The last model would exit. The music would slow. Adrian would step forward. Behind him, the screen would display several patron pieces from the collection, ending with the silver blue sketch. Beneath it would appear the line already approved months earlier, commissioned and purchased by Mrs. Vivian Hartwell, Hartwell Arts Foundation, in honor of Margaret Sloan. Vivian read her mother's name and felt the air leave her slowly. Margaret Sloan, not Celeste Monroe, not Nathaniel's office, not a borrowed body in borrowed light. Her mother's name would stand where it belonged, beneath the sketch, above the applause, written into the evening before anyone tried to steal it. Adrian watched her carefully. I can arrange security if you prefer not to attend. Vivian shook her head. If I stay away, they will call it grace. If I attend, they will have to call it record. That evening, Vivian dressed without asking anyone what would make her look strongest. Strength had become too loud a word for what she needed. She chose a simple black dress with long sleeves and a clean neckline, the kind of dress that did not compete with memory. She fastened her mother's pearl earrings, the same pair Margaret had worn in the old gala photograph, and brushed her hair back until her face looked calm enough to survive public cruelty. On her vanity lay the invitation, the buyer card Mara had copied for her, and a small printed photograph of the silver blue sketch. She did not take the sketch. She did not need to carry proof in her hands when the atelier would place it on a screen larger than any whisper in the room. At 7:25, Nathaniel texted her, "Please be reasonable tonight." Vivian looked at the message, then placed the phone face down. Reasonable. The word men used when they wanted women to accept humiliation quietly enough to keep dinner reservations, board seats, runway invitations, and reputations intact. Her car moved down Fifth Avenue through wet evening traffic, past glowing storefronts and black umbrellas, toward the private venue where the fashion show had already begun to gather its audience. She watched Manhattan reflect in the window, all glass, light, and beautiful distance. By the time she stepped out beneath the awning, photographers were already calling names. She heard Celeste's laugh before she saw the gown. It floated through the entrance like a bright ribbon pulled across a wound. Vivian paused only long enough to breathe once. Then she walked inside in black, wearing pearls, carrying nothing but her invitation and the patience of a woman who knew the final slide had already been written. Inside the runway room, Celeste had already learned how to make borrowed meaning look effortless. She stood near the front row beneath a wash of silver light, letting photographers capture the gown from every angle, one hand resting lightly at her waist, her smile polished for editors who wanted a story before the show even began. Nathaniel stood close enough for the cameras to connect them, his black suit immaculate, his expression smooth with the confidence of a man who believed the world would accept whatever image he offered first. Vivian entered without rushing. Her black dress absorbed the light instead of chasing it, and her mother's pearl earrings caught only the smallest gleam when she turned her head. For a moment, no one noticed the difference between spectacle and authority. They only saw Celeste shining in silver blue satin and Vivian standing in silence across the aisle. Then Celeste saw her and lifted her chin as though the gown had crowned her. "Vivian," she said warmly, loud enough for the nearby editors to hear. "I am so glad you came. It would have been sad for you to miss seeing what Adrian created." The sentence was wrapped in manners and lined with glass. Nathaniel looked at Vivian with a quiet warning in his eyes, the same look he had used for years when he wanted her dignity to behave like cooperation. Celeste turned slightly, letting the train spread across the polished floor. The crystals caught the camera flashes, and the gown seemed to breathe with every movement, more alive than the woman using it to wound. One fashion editor leaned toward another and whispered, unaware that Vivian could hear every word beneath the low music. "Is that the Sloan tribute piece? I thought it was commissioned privately." Celeste smiled as if she had been waiting for that opening. "Adrian designs for women who know how to be seen," she said. "Some people outgrow a dress before they ever wear it." A few soft laughs moved through the front row, cautious but real enough to cut. Nathaniel did not correct her. He only adjusted his cuff link and looked toward the runway, as if the insult had been an unfortunate sound the room should politely ignore. Vivian felt the pain move through her again, but this time it did not surprise her. It passed over the place where hope had once lived and found the door already closed. She looked at the gown and saw the hidden tag beneath the side seam, the buyer card in Mara's archive, the closing screen waiting backstage, her mother's name already loaded into the production queue. Celeste was not wearing victory. She was wearing a question the room had not yet learned to ask. An usher approached with a program and gestured toward Vivian's original seat beside Nathaniel. "Mrs. Hartwell, your place is here." Vivian looked at the chair, at Nathaniel standing beside it, at Celeste occupying the attention meant to erase her. Then she shook her head gently. "I will sit across the aisle." Nathaniel leaned closer. "Vivian, do not make this public." She looked at him, calm beneath the cold runway lights. "You already did." The music shifted. Guests began taking their seats. Celeste lowered herself into the front row with the gown arranged carefully around her, still smiling, still believing the cameras had chosen her. Vivian sat opposite in black, placed her invitation across her lap, and waited while the room applauded the opening look. She did not need to pull the truth forward. The show was walking toward it one step at a time. By the time the final model disappeared behind the white curtain, the runway room had settled into that satisfied hush expensive audiences make when they believe they have understood everything correctly. Celeste sat angled toward the cameras, the silver blue gown arranged across her knees like proof, one hand resting lightly on the crystal work while Nathaniel leaned close enough for every editor to read the image as possession. Vivian sat across the aisle in black, her invitation still on her lap, her mother's pearls cool against her skin. She had watched each look pass under the lights without truly seeing fabric. All evening, she had listened for the moment Adrian had promised would arrive quietly, without spectacle, without accusation, without giving Celeste the gift of being dragged into a scandal. Then the music changed. The sharp runway beat softened into a low piano line, and the overhead lights dimmed until the room became blue around the edges. Conversations faded. Phones lifted again. Adrian Vale stepped onto the runway in a dark suit, slim and still beneath the central spotlight. He bowed once to the room, then turned toward the screen behind him. "Tonight," he said, "this collection honors the private patrons and buyers who made several tribute pieces possible." His voice was calm, but Vivian saw Mara Ellison standing near the production booth, one hand resting on the edge of the console, eyes fixed on the queue. The first sketch appeared on the screen. Polite applause followed. Then the second. Then the third. Celeste smiled faintly, not yet understanding why Adrian's gaze had moved toward the front row. Nathaniel shifted in his seat. Vivian did not move. At last, the screen changed to the original sketch of the silver blue gown. The room recognized it immediately. A small ripple moved through the editors, donors, and stylists as eyes traveled from the drawing on the screen to the gown on Celeste's body. Beneath the sketch, the letters appeared in clean white type, commissioned and purchased by Mrs. Vivian Hartwell, Hartwell Arts Foundation, in honor of Margaret Sloan. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of every camera, every whisper, every lie suddenly losing its shape. Adrian faced the room and continued. This closing tribute belongs to the buyer whose mother inspired the piece, and whose foundation supports young artists across the country. Mrs. Vivian Hartwell made this gown possible. Cameras turned. Not slowly, not politely. They pivoted from Celeste's silver blue shimmer to Vivian sitting across the aisle in a plain black dress and pearls. Flash after flash found her face. Celeste's hand fell from the gown as if the fabric had changed temperature. Nathaniel looked at the screen, then at Vivian, and for the first time that night, his expression had nothing polished left in it. An editor near Celeste whispered, "That is her dress." Another corrected softly, "Not just hers. Her mother's tribute." Vivian felt the ache return, but it no longer arrived as humiliation. It came as recognition. Adrian stepped down from the runway and inclined his head toward her with formal respect. The applause began carefully, then grew, not wild, not cruel, but unmistakably directed away from the woman wearing the gown and toward the woman whose name had been sewn into its truth. Celeste sat beneath the lights in borrowed silver, surrounded by cameras that no longer admired her. They documented her. The applause did not save Celeste. It surrounded her. She sat beneath the runway lights in the silver blue gown, the same crystals still shimmering, the same train still arranged with care, but every inch of beauty had changed, meaning the moment Vivian's name appeared on the screen. A few minutes earlier, photographers had leaned toward Celeste as if she were the story. Now their lenses moved past her, searching for the woman in black across the aisle. Vivian did not rise at first. She let the room finish understanding what the designer had said. Commissioned and purchased by Mrs. Vivian Hartwell, in honor of Margaret Sloan. The words remained on the screen behind Adrian Vale, like a signature no one could erase. Nathaniel stood quickly, too quickly for a man trying to look composed. He crossed the aisle while the applause faded into whispers, his face pale beneath the clean runway light. "Vivian," he said quietly, "this is a misunderstanding." She looked at him, then at the screen, then at Celeste, who had stopped touching the gown as though the fabric itself had become evidence. "A misunderstanding does not require a delivery redirect," Vivian said. Nathaniel lowered his voice. "My assistant handled the details. I did not think it would matter." Vivian's eyes softened for half a second, not with forgiveness, but with the old sadness of seeing a familiar man choose a smaller lie when the larger truth had already entered the room. "You let her wear my mother's tribute," she said. "The designer only named the woman you tried to erase." Celeste rose then, gathering the train awkwardly, the grace she had practiced all evening breaking under the weight of the room's attention. "I did not know it was that personal," she said, but the apology arrived late and thin, shaped more by embarrassment than understanding. Vivian looked at the gown, at the neckline inspired by Margaret Sloan's gala portrait, at the crystals meant to honor scholarship lights, at the hidden lining where her name had been sewn before anyone else touched it. "You knew enough to wear it in front of cameras," she replied. That was all she gave her. No raised voice. No public argument. No scene for gossip pages to call emotional. Adrian stepped closer and inclined his head to Vivian, formal and unmistakable. "Mrs. Hartwell, on behalf of the atelier, thank you for making this tribute possible." The room heard him. Mara Ellison stood near the aisle with the buyer file held against her chest, steady as record itself. Vivian finally stood. Camera flashes brightened, but she did not look toward them. She looked once at her mother's name on the screen and felt something inside her settle, not healed, not untouched, but returned to its rightful place. Nathaniel reached for words again. "Vivian, we can talk after this." She stepped past him. "No," she said. "You can explain it to the people you wanted to impress." Then she walked toward Adrian, accepted his respectful nod, and continued down the aisle in her black dress and pearls while the audience parted without being asked. Behind her, Celeste remained in the gown that no longer looked like victory. It looked like a receipt. Nathaniel stood beside her, exposed under the same lights he had trusted to flatter him. Vivian did not take the gown back. She let the whole room hear whose name was sewn into it.